This is part 40 of Good Omens. Sunday, the first day of the rest of their lives. At around 10:30, the paperboy brought the Sunday papers to the front door of Jasmine Cottage. He had to make 3 trips. The series of thumps as they hit the mat woke up Newton Pulsifer. He left Anathema asleep. She was pretty shattered, poor thing. She'd been almost incoherent when he'd put her to bed. She'd run her life according to the prophecies, and now there was no more prophecies. She must be feeling like a train which had reached the end of the line, but still had to keep going somehow. From now on, she'd be able to go through life with everything coming as a surprise, just like everyone else. What luck. The telephone rang. Newt dashed for the kitchen and picked up the receiver on the second ring. "Hello?" he said. A voice of forced friendliness tinted with desperation gabbled at him. "No," he said, "I'm not, and it's not Divacy, it's Device, as in nice, and she's asleep." "Well," he said, "I'm pretty sure she doesn't want any cavities insulated or double glazing. I mean, she doesn't own the cottage, you know, she's only renting it." "No, I'm not going to wake her up and ask her," he said, "and tell me, Miss Morrow. Why don't you lot take Sundays off like everybody else does?" "Sunday," he said. "Of course it's not Saturday. Why would it be Saturday? Saturday was yesterday. It's honestly Sunday today, really. What do you mean you've lost a day? I haven't got it. Seems to me you've got a bit carried away with selling." "Hello?" he growled and replaced the receiver. Telephone salespeople. Something dreadful ought to happen to them. He was assailed by a moment of sudden doubt. Today was Sunday, wasn't it? A glance at the Sunday papers reassured him. If the Sunday Times said it was Sunday, you could be sure that they'd investigated the matter. And yesterday was Saturday. Of course, yesterday was Saturday, and he'd never forget Saturday for as long as he lived, if only he could remember what it was he wasn't meant to forget. Seeing that he was in the kitchen, Newt decided to make breakfast. He moved around the kitchen as quietly as possible to avoid waking the rest of the household, and found every sound magnified. The antique fridge had a door that shut like the crack of doom. The kitchen tap dribbled like a diuretic gerbil, and made a noise like Old Faithful, and he couldn't find where anything was. In the end, as every human being who has ever had breakfast on their own in someone else's kitchen has done since nearly the dawn of time, he made do with unsweetened instant black coffee. Except for Giovanni Jacopo Casanova, 1725 to 1798, famed amorist and liacher, who revealed in volume 12 of his memoirs that, as a matter of course, he carried around with him at all times a small vessel containing a loaf of bread, a pot of choice Seville marmalade, a knife, a fork, and small spoon for stirring, 2 fresh eggs packed with care in unspun wool, a tomato or love apple, a small frying pan, a small saucepan, a spirit burner, a chafing dish, a tin box of salted butter of the Italian type, 2 bone china plates, also a portion of honeycomb as a sweetener, for my breath and for my coffee. Let my readers understand me when I say to them all, a true gentleman should always be able to break his fast in the manner of a gentleman, whereso he may find himself. On the kitchen table was a roughly rectangular leather-bound cinder. He could just make out the words "ne," "e," and "ac" on the charred cover. What a difference a day made, he thought. It turned you from the ultimate reference book to a mere barbecue brisket. Now then, how exactly had they got it? He recalled a man who smelled of smoke and wore sunglasses even in darkness. And there was other stuff, all running together, boys on bikes, an unpleasant buzzing, a small grubby staring face. They all hung around in his mind, not exactly forgotten, but forever hanging on the cusp of recollection, a memory of things that hadn't happened. And there was the matter of Dick Turpin. It looked like the same car, except that forever afterwards it seemed able to do 250 miles on a gallon of petrol, ran so quietly that you practically had to put your mouth over the exhaust pipe to see if the engine was firing, and issued its voice-synthesized warnings in a series of exquisite and perfectly phrased haikus, each one original and apt. Late frost burns the bloom, would a fool not let the belt restrain his body? And, it would say, and the cherry blossom tumbles from the highest tree, one needs more petrol. How could you have that? He sat staring at the wall until a knock at the door brought him back to earth. There was a small, dapper man in a black raincoat standing on the doorstep. He was holding a cardboard box, and he gave it to Newt with a bright smile. Mr. He consulted a piece of paper in one hand. Pulsifer. Pulsifer, said Newt. It has a hard S. I'm ever so sorry, said the man. I've only ever seen it written down. Well then, it would appear that this is for you and Mrs. Pulsifer. Newt gave him a blank look. There's no Mrs. Pulsifer, he said coldly. The man removed his bowler hat. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, he said. I mean that... Well, there's my mother, said Newt. But she's not dead. She's just endorking. I'm not married. How odd. The letter is quite, specific. Who are you? Said Newt. He was wearing only his trousers, and it was chilly on the doorstep. The man balanced the box awkwardly and fished out a card from his inner pocket. He handed it to Newt. Giles Baddicombe, Robbie, Red Fern, and by chance, solicitors, 13 Demdike Chambers, Preston. Yes, he said politely. And what can I do for you, Mr. Baddicombe? You could let me in, said Mr. Baddicombe. You're not serving a writ or anything, are you? Said Newt. The events of last day hung in his memory like a cloud, constantly changing whenever he thought he could make out a picture, but he was vaguely aware of damaging things and had been expecting retribution in some form. No, said Mr. Baddicombe, looking slightly hurt. We have people for that sort of thing. He wandered past Newt and put the box down on the table. To be honest, he said, we're all very interested in this. Mr. Bychance nearly came down himself, but he doesn't travel well these days. Look, said Newt, I really haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about. This, said Mr. Baddicombe, proffering the box and beaming like a Aziraphale about to attempt a conjuring trick, is yours. Someone wanted you to have it. They were very specific. A present, said Newt. He eyed the taped cardboard cautiously and then rummaged in the kitchen drawer for a sharp knife. I think more a bequest, said Mr. Baddicombe. You see, we've had it for 300 years. Sorry, was it something I said? Hold it under the tap. I should. What the hell is this all about? Said Newt, but a certain icy suspicion was creeping over him. He sucked at the cut. It's a funny story. Do you mind if I sit down? And of course, I don't know the full details because I joined the firm only 15 years ago, but it had been a very small legal firm when the box had been cautiously delivered. Redfern, Bychance, and both the Robbies, let alone Mr. Baddicombe, were a long way in the future. The struggling legal clerk who had accepted delivery had been surprised to find, tied to the top of the box with twine, a letter addressed to himself. It contained certain instructions and 5 interesting facts about the history of the next 10 years, which, if put to good use by a keen young man, would ensure enough finance to pursue a very successful legal career. All he had to do was see that the box was carefully looked after for rather more than 300 years and then delivered to a certain address. Although, of course, the firm had changed hands many times over the centuries, said Mr. Baddicombe, but the box has always been part of the cattles, as it were. I didn't even know they made Heinz baby food in the 17th century, said Newt. That was just to keep it undamaged in the car, said Mr. Baddicombe. But no one's opened it in all these years, said Newt. Twice, I believe, said Mr. Baddicombe. In 1757 by Mr. George Cranby, and in 1928 by Mr. Arthur Bychance, father of the present Mr. Bychance, he coughed. Apparently Mr. Cranby found a letter addressed to himself, said Newt. Mr. Baddicombe sat back hurriedly. My word, how did you guess that? I think I recognize the style, said Newt grimly. What happened to them? Have you heard this before? Said Mr. Baddicombe suspiciously. Not in so many words. They weren't blown up, were they? Well, Mr. Cranby had a heart attack, it is believed, and Mr. Bychance went very pale and put his letter back in its envelope, I understand, and gave very strict instructions that the box wasn't to be opened again in his lifetime. He said anyone who opened the box would be sacked without references. A dire threat, said Newt sarcastically. It was, in 1928. Anyway, their letters are in the box. Newt pulled the cardboard aside. There was a small iron-bound chest inside. It had no lock. Go on, lift it out, said Mr. Baddicombe excitedly. I must say, I'd very much like to know what's in there. We've had bets on it in the office. I'll tell you what, said Newt generously. I'll make us some coffee, and you can open the box. Me? Would that be proper? I don't see why not. Newt eyed the saucepans hanging over the stove. One of them was big enough for what he had in mind. Go on, he said. Be a devil. I don't mind. You could have the power of attorney or something. Mr. Badcombe took off his overcoat. Well, he said, rubbing his hands together, since you put it like that, it'd be something to tell my grandchildren. Newt picked up the saucepan and laid his hand gently on the door handle. I hope so, he said. Here goes. Newt heard a faint creak. What can you see? He said. There's 2 open letters. Oh, and a 3rd one, addressed to. Newt heard the snap of a wax seal and the clink of something on the table. Then there was a gasp, the clatter of a chair, the sound of running feet in the hallway, the slam of a door, and the sound of a car engine being jerked into life and then redlined down the lane. Newt took the saucepan off his head and came out from behind the door. He picked up the letter and was not 100% surprised to see that it was addressed to Mr. G. Badcombe. He unfolded it. It read, Here's a Florian lawyer. Now run fast, lest the world know the truth about you and Mistress Spidden, the typewriting machine slavey. Newt looked at the other letters. The crackling paper of one addressed to George Cranby said, Remove thy thieving hand, Master Cranby. I mind well how you swindled the widow Plaskin in this Michael's past, ye skin old snatch pastry. Newt wondered what a snatch pastry was. He would be prepared to bet that it didn't involve cookery. The next one that had awaited the inquisitive Mr. Bychance said, You left them, you coward. Return this letter to the box, lest the world know the true events of June 7th, 1916. Under the letters was a manuscript. Newt stared at it. What's that? Said Anathema. He spun around. She was leaning against the door frame like an attractive yawn on legs. Newt backed against the table. Oh, nothing. Wrong address. Nothing. Just some old box. Junk mail. You know how... On a Sunday? She said, pushing him aside. He shrugged as she put her hands around the yellow manuscript and lifted it out. Further nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Netter, she read slowly. Concerning the world that is to come, ye saga continued. Oh my! She laid it reverently on the table and prepared to turn the first page. Newt's hand landed gently on hers. Think of it like this, he said quietly. Do you want to be a descendant for the rest of your life? She looked up. Their eyes met. It was Sunday, the first day of the rest of the world, around 11:30. St. James Park was comparatively quiet. The ducks, who were experts in real pillocking, as seen from the bread end, put it down to a decrease in world tension. There really had been a decrease in world tension, in fact, but a lot of people were in offices trying to find out why, trying to find where Atlantis had disappeared to, with 3 international fact-finding delegations on it, and trying to work out what had happened to all their computers yesterday. The park was deserted except for a member of MI9 trying to recruit someone who, to the later mutual embarrassment, would turn out to also be a member of MI9, and a tall man feeding the ducks. And there was also Crowley and Aziraphale. They strolled side by side across the grass. Same here, said Aziraphale. The shop's all there. Not much as a soot mark on it. I mean, you can't just make an old Bentley, said Crowley. You can't get a patina. But there it was, Lodge's life. Right there in the street. You can't tell the difference. Well, I can tell the difference, said Aziraphale. I'm sure I didn't stock books with titles like Biggles Goes to Mars, and Jack Cade Frontier Hero, and 101 Things a Boy Can Do, and Bloody Dogs of the Skull Sea. Gosh, I'm sorry, said Crowley, who knew how much the angel had treasured his book collection. Don't be, said Aziraphale happily. They're all mint first editions, and I looked them up in Skindle's price guide. I think the phrase you use is woo-ee. I thought he was putting the world back just as it was, said Crowley. Yes, said Aziraphale, more or less, as best he can, but he's got a sense of humor, too. Crowley gave him a sideways look. Your people been in touch? He said. No. Yours? No. I think they're pretending it didn't happen. Mine, too, I suppose. There's bureaucracy for you. And I think mine are waiting to see what happens next, said Aziraphale. Crowley nodded. A breathing space, he said. A chance to morally rearm, get the defenses up, ready for the big one. They stood by the pond watching the ducks scrabble for the bread. Sorry, said Aziraphale. I thought that was the big one. I'm not sure, said Crowley. Think about it. For my money, the real big one will be all of us against all of them. What, you mean heaven and hell against humanity? Crowley shrugged. Of course, if he did change everything, then maybe he changed himself too. Got rid of his powers, perhaps. Decided to stay human. Oh, I do hope so, said Aziraphale. Anyway, I'm sure the alternative wouldn't be allowed. Would it? I don't know. You can never be certain about what's really intended. Plans within plans. Sorry, said Aziraphale. Well, said Crowley, who had been thinking about this until his head ached. Haven't you ever wondered about it all? You know, your people and my people, heaven and hell, good and evil, all that sort of thing. I mean, why? As I recall, said the angel stiffly, there was the rebellion and... Ah, yes, but why did it happen, eh? I mean, it didn't have to, did it? Said Crowley, a manic look in his eye. Anyone who could build a universe in 6 days isn't going to let a little thing like that happen, unless they want it to, of course. Oh, come on, be sensible, said Aziraphale doubtfully. That's not good advice, said Crowley. That's not good advice at all. If you sit down and think about it sensibly, you come up with some very funny ideas, like why make people inquisitive and then put some forbidden fruit where they can see it, with a big neon finger flashing on and off saying, this is it. I don't remember any neon. Metaphorically, I mean. Why do you do that if you really don't want them to eat it, eh? I mean, maybe you just want to see how it all turns out. Maybe it's all part of a great ineffable plan. All of it. You, me, him, everything. Some great big test to see if what you've built all works properly, eh? You start thinking, it can't be a great cosmic game of chess. It has to be just very complicated solitaire. And don't bother to answer. If we could understand, we wouldn't be us. Because it's all ineffable, said the figure feeding the ducks. Yeah, right, thanks. They watched the tall stranger carefully dispose of the empty bag in a litter bin and stalk away across the grass. Then Crowley shook his head. What was I saying? He said. Don't know, said Aziraphale. Nothing very important, I think. Crowley nodded gloomily. Let me tempt you to some lunch, he hissed. They went to the Ritz again, where a table was mysteriously vacant, and perhaps their recent exertions had some falling out in the nature of reality, because while they were eating, for the first time ever, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. No one heard it over the noise of traffic, but it was there, right enough.